This program is made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Nerd TV. Robert X. Cringely interviews Sun Microsystems co-founder Bill Joy, June 30th, 2005.
So, Bill, it seems to me that there is this logical progression that maybe it's not logical progression, that we're seeing of entrepreneurs / techies, whatever you call yourselves, becoming venture capitalists. You're now a VC after, 20, 25 years of something else?
Well, 30.
30 years of something else.
Right.
How does it feel?
Well, it's 30 years of several other things.
Okay.
I was a programmer writing Unix. I went to Sun, started the company, did both hardware and software architecture, language design with Java, was the external spokesperson for Sun. But then for the last few years...
the first RISC processor?
RISC processor. Well, there was MIPS, and the first RISC processor was really the 801 from IBM, but one of the first commercial RISC architectures. But for the last years at Sun, I incubated stuff. I got tired of traveling and decided to start things, and did some angel investing. So, but in going to Kleiner Perkins, I had a lot of friends there. They invested in Sun in 1982. So it was really coming home to work with friends in a way, and continuing to help great entrepreneurs start great companies. It's a great pleasure to work with such great people.
Can you sense when a great entrepreneur walks in a room? Are there 3 questions you can ask an entrepreneur that measures their greatness?
Passion is the first thing. Big ideas, passion, and also an ability to make it real. It's a long path. There's a lot of steps towards realizing a great idea. You got to have the high and the low. You got to have the great vision, but you got to have the rolled up sleeves, dirty fingernails to really go and get started. And the passion's easy to sense, but sometimes it's hot air too. So what takes a little more time to judge, I think, is how practical and real that part of the entrepreneurial spirit that puts the thing together and really gets it going.
And so are there instances where you would recommend walking away from a deal because you sensed hot air rather than... Oh,
absolutely. We see a lot of, we don't call them deals, we call them investments or opportunities or entrepreneurs. A deal, I think, is as John Doerr has said, that's a word which kind of degrades what is really going on. So
sure.
I'll be careful not to say the word. I know it's hard. It's one of these things like, it's like this and it's like that. People are saying it all the time.
We'll take it as our challenge in this show to not use the word deal again.
Okay. There are contexts in which it may be the appropriate word, but you can often tell, yes.
And so as an entrepreneur turned venture capitalist, you probably spend more of your time saying no than saying yes.
Oh, inevitably, we see several thousand entrepreneurs' business plans come through every year and invest in perhaps 20.
Wow.
So it's a low hit rate.
In your position, you could probably just phone it in by just saying no to everything.
Oh, there's a lot of great ideas that come through that almost make it. I mean, it isn't always easy, and you don't get to pursue every opportunity that you want to. There's competition out there, and there are a lot of people who are very resourceful. You find out things, you get a look at it, but they decide to fund it along for themselves. Many of the great investments have had only a single round of financing, and so if you miss that round, whether it's an A round, which would be the really early round, or what we call a B round, which is really the first real capital, if you miss that one round, you don't have a shot at it.
There's always the story about any company, any successful company you can name went to 20, 40, 50, 100 venture capital firms before someone signed on. And it seems that that's inevitable. What is it about a potential opportunity that makes you even look at it when you know that 68 other people saw it and decided against it.
Well, thanks to Google, we don't have that situation all the time anymore. I had an entrepreneur with a very exciting technology. It was very early. This slides that he brought said that he'd have a first commercial product in 2014. Of course, this was with the sort of starvation level internal funding he had in the organization he's in now, which doesn't quite fit in their mission. And what he said to us was, how did you find us? And the answer was, we were looking for something vaguely similar and just stumbled across his link on the web. And it took us a while to track him down. I mean, we had a reference to it without a complete reference, and I asked my administrator to try to track it down, and she did. And then he was very surprised to be talking to us.
So the idea we have of entrepreneurs knocking on doors, sometimes it's venture capitalists who do the knocking.
There's no shortage of people coming and knocking on the door. But we also incubate new ideas and also go outbound looking for things. But probably the majority of them are incoming.
Now, if you have a situation where you meet an entrepreneur or come across an idea and you try to package it somehow, maybe the entrepreneur needs a better idea or the idea needs a better entrepreneur, and how, my guess is that often you'll go pretty far down the path and still decide against it.
Right.
What happens to those opportunities? Do you hand them to someone else or just write them off?
Well, sometimes you send people to a different kind of money, shall you say. I mean, people don't come to Kleiner Perkins for money as much as they come to for relationship leverage. We like to say we do not only venture capital but relationship capital, because people need introductions to employees, to partners, to other businesses that become their channels. But if it's possible, people come when they don't have the possibility of venture-sized returns. So something that has a upside of in 5 years of being 5 times the money would look perhaps to a lot of people as a good investment. But that's not the kind of investment we normally would put in a portfolio if it doesn't have a chance of a larger return. Because there's enough risk in our investments that a portfolio without opportunities with more upside would be not well constructed.
What kind of upside do you look for?
Well, if it's going to be a $5 or $10 million business in 5 years, that's not interesting. If it's a $100 million business in 5 years, it has a potential for that. That's more interesting. So you need to have a reasonable sized market, because you have to put a lot of energy in to trying to make the venture successful. And if you do make it successful, you would like it to become a sustainable and significant enterprise. We like to build significant companies and have, invested, over the years. I've known the partnership, and I'm speaking more, in companies that have become significant, like Sun, Lotus, Amazon, Intel, Genentech, Compaq, and so on.
Well, you seem to be succeeding. How is it different to be on your side versus the other side that you were on for so many years?
Well, it's much harder work than I thought it would be. It's more exciting than I thought it would be. There's more interesting things to look at, overwhelming. And the process is much more rigorous than I thought it would be. So it's kind of surprised on the upside in every way. So
we don't have just a bunch of partners fighting over the checkbook to write something?
No. It really is a partnership. It's non-hierarchical, in which case it's a democracy of ideas and argument. I mean, you have to convince your partners that it's a good opportunity to pursue, that it's not only worth the money, but it's worth the time, and that the vision is, big, like I said, but also the practical aspect is there, that the team can be completed. I mean, very few teams come in that are complete, whether they need be engineering or marketing or whatever missing piece, often money, but more often it's the putting together the other pieces and guiding the team to understand the things that they don't, to come to an understanding of the things that they don't, because of other investments that are in their portfolio.
You're early in this process of being a general partner. I mean, you just joined earlier this year.
At the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah. Have you had to fire anyone yet?
In a company?
Yeah.
No. I haven't made a investment where I'm the lead partner yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that it was a good idea to take your time. I'm kind of co-partnering or whatever you'd call it with other people on several new investments since I joined, and I am also assisting on some pre-existing investments. We work across the whole. Everybody works on whatever they need to work on. So I'm working across the whole portfolio. Mm-hmm. But no, I'm not afraid to help make the changes that are necessary. It's better for often both for the company, obviously, if the change needs to be made. It's also often better for the people who leave, because it's not necessarily there's anything wrong with them. It's just there's a lack of a fit, and it's better to admit it and take the pain up front and get on with doing something else.
I figured out a while back that I've been fired from every job I ever held.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's quite amazing.
And I thought for a moment that was bad, but I realized every time I got fired, it was really probably a better thing.
I got fired from the International House of Pancakes.
How did that come about?
I was going to college and cooking to make money to go to graduate school, and I'd worked there for 2 weeks, and if I'd have been there one more day, I would have been in the union. So they fired me. I think that was their strategy because you could pay people less, so they just kept using temporary people to fill in.
So everyone they hired, they knew they were hiring for 2 weeks, but you thought you were working.
There seems to be an infinite supply of college students, and the job didn't require a lot of skill. So.
Oh, I don't know. You have to know just when to flip those flapjacks.
Yeah, that's about right. It's a temp agency. It was a temp agency optimization of the pay scale.
Where do what opportunities are you looking for right now? And I ask that basically because I want to get into this idea of where is technology going.
Right.
And so do you see any waves appearing on the horizon that we ought to be aware of?
Well, we have a broad partnership, and we have a life sciences group. Brooke Byers, who's a name partner, is our senior person in that area, but with a number of other people, including some new partners in the life sciences. And we have a larger group in probably what you'd say generally are the information technology, which includes not only the internet, but also electronics, software, hardware companies, and so on. And we also have some investments in energy and materials areas. So I'm not working on the life science opportunities in general. Sometimes a life science opportunity will come by and it will be adjacent and applicable also with a different market. So there's an investment presentation in a couple of weeks of a company who has a technology applicable to medical devices, but I can see that there might be a government application for the same technology. So I'll go to that meeting. But I'm on the non-life science side of the house. And I'm a generalist, really. I'm looking at networking ventures, software ventures, energy ventures, materials ventures, all the whole range of things. There's a few of us. John Doerr is another person who I'd consider to be a generalist. Other people are more specific. Ted Schlein has mostly done security-related investments and has a very nice portfolio of investments in that area. So he's more specific.
Do you? I guess I'm wondering about areas that are emerging technologies that are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And in every little technical era, we say, oh, that's client-server computing. That's
right.
Network computing. That's workstations.
Right.
That's
right.
wireless.
Right.
what are we just leaving and what are we just entering into?
Right, we're leaving an era where it was relatively simple. There was electronics burst on the scene, Moore's law, and things changed very quantitatively. So we had a mini computer or then a big personal computer, and the personal computers kept shrinking or getting more powerful for a very long period, maybe 20 years. And then suddenly what happened was we passed a threshold where the miniaturization allowed suddenly a cell phone, to do much of what had the power of what your computer used to be, but now it fits in your pocket and a little tiny keyboard, little tiny screen, and it's always connected. And that's very different. So the computers on the information side are becoming less recognizably kind of morphologically, kind of the same shape, just shrunk and slightly altered as they were 30 years ago. They're becoming more invisible. They're having different ways of interacting with them by talking to them or touching them or having them always with you as opposed to something that's in your bag, which you don't always have with you. Mm-hmm. So there's really we've gone from kind of a single trajectory, the Microsoft Intel personal computer wave trajectory with some life science, early genetics beside it, to now having new sciences and materials, whole range of new opportunities in energy, much broader set of opportunities in the life sciences, and really a confluence of software with all the sciences that makes new things possible.
Wow. And can we trace that? It sounds like we can trace every bit of that just back to Moore's law.
Well, we talk about it nanoscale, nanotechnology.
Yeah.
What really happened is it's not so much the measure, a nanometer or an angstrom or getting to that scale. It's that we used to design things by kind of chipping away at them. And once we start to understand and manipulate at the atomic level, we're building things up through understanding from the bottom instead of sort of shaping and planing and carving and chiseling,
up instead
sanding.
Of carving down.
Exactly. And that requires understanding as opposed to observing properties. And so you see it in the biological sciences. You can start to manipulate and understand what's going on in a drop of blood. Take that apart. Look at all the proteins that are in there. Infer something about it. It's an enormous amount of data. Or and design a new material from an understanding of the chemical properties of the atomic structures. Carbon nanotubes and all their interesting properties and so on.
So, I just have to tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I met for the first time Ray Kurzweil. We were on the same program. He spoke before me. I spoke after him. He offered terrific opportunities to ridicule him, and I did. But here's a guy who's essentially extended some of the logarithmic growth functions that we have in these materials areas and technology in general, and extrapolated them into the future, and in doing so declared, perhaps human labor is no longer necessary. That leap from here to there is one I'm not sure is capable even of being made.
Right.
But the thing that he said the other day that struck me was that he said in 2029 we would have for $1,000 you could buy a computer that was 10,000 times as smart, whatever that means, as a human being. Okay, is that possible?
If you look at his graphs, it appears to be. I think the thing is, first of all, we don't know quite how human beings are smart. Jeff Hawkins has a new book that's very interesting on intelligence, and talks about his theory of this. And if his theory is correct, that would be an advance. But simply having a fast computer doesn't mean we'll know how to make it intelligent. It certainly helps to be smart to make a smart computer if it can go faster. You're certainly limited in what you can do. You think about having a conversation, and I say something, you tend to respond. You're thinking ahead, you're anticipating what I'm going to say, you're formulating the next thing you're going to say. You can typically start talking in a fraction of a second.
No.
well,
I'm vacant.
No, it's not true. Anyways, so a computer can't process very much in a fraction of a second. Think of all the music on your hard disk. If I played you a song, you could probably think of another song that was like it very, very quickly. Maybe you could build a database for the computer so it could do that, but you can do that without having to decide in advance to build the database. In other words, you've got your memory organized in some sophisticated way so you can recall. And we don't quite know how to organize a large mass of information, so that's true. As marvelous as Google is, it's not the same as talking to somebody who really knows what's going on in an area. But of course, nobody knows everything that's going on in an area, so sometimes it's better, but more often than not, it's worse than talking to a person who's really knowledgeable.
Do you know, I was reading the other day a book called The Wisdom of Crowds. Have you read it?
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it.
Which basically says that somehow we do know everything, only we just don't know we know it.
Well, in some sociological sense, maybe
Yes.
we do, but in a scientific sense, I don't think that's true.
No, probably not. But I found it fascinating, this idea that perhaps the mask, that the data mask that you're talking about applying to my music collection, you know, I know it in so many different facets
exactly.
that I'm able then to sort of, after the fact, apply the filter, whereas the computer system would have to go back to the data and apply the filter.
Well, there's certain kind of questions and certain kind of things that crowds can do, or that intuition, you know, Mal Gladwell's blink, you know, there's certain kinds of things like that that work, but I don't, and those things may have economic value in a consumer society, but they don't, there's other questions, other problems, other truths to be sought, that I don't think that applies.
What are the global problems, perhaps technological problems, perhaps not, but what are the problems that you worry about?
Well, helping my kids grow up to be responsible and happy citizens.
How many kids do you have?
My partner and I have 4. And,
that's a bunch of kids.
Yeah, and 2 teenagers and, you know, 11 and 9-year-olds. You know, so kids are growing up faster than before. You know, trying to do help people who can do great things, significant and important things, solve important problems in my work, have a good relationship, live a good life, you know. But from the work perspective, that's one of the reasons why I'm looking at the energy and materials area, because those are clearly pressing problems.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're pumping the earth dry of oil and burning it up in ways that aren't environmentally responsible.
Well, we're doing an experiment without precedent. There was an article in the paper today about how the oceans are getting more acidic. So it's going to break down the shells of the reefs. You know, it's an uncontrolled experiment. We better not to do it. But the economic forces are driving us in that way. So it's not necessarily practical to just wish it to change, because people will do pretty much what they want to do. The best thing to do is to find some profitable way to alter the course. If you could find a way to not use so much energy, or to make the energy more efficiently, or find an alternative source of energy that doesn't produce so much CO2, that would be a very positive thing. And so we're looking at investments in areas like solar, wind, fuel cells, other innovative new technologies that might address this issue.
Do you worry about the kind of political? Whoops. Do you worry about the political context and repercussions of these things, as well as, you know, just technology and? I'm
not looking to the politicians, at least the current class of leaders, in this country at least, to really address these issues. So we're trying to do it on the entrepreneurial side.
And is that a simpler world where it's let's make some money doing good?
I don't think the government can lead, but ultimately we need new ideas to solve these problems as well. A less backward-looking, less extractive strategy from the government would help. But if that's not forthcoming, I think there's still an opportunity to make a lot of money by doing better. So we can hopefully achieve and make progress in that direction without waiting for political change.
Now, this orientation on energy and materials, as a guy whose background is primarily in information technology,
right?
Does that? I'm hearing that maybe that means that the IT opportunities are not what they used to be.
No, I'm looking at a lot of IT opportunities, but you have to remember that energy and materials are also related. Say, materials is related to how software is used to understand and model the design of those. And in the energy is using fine-grained structures, often built using some of the same equipment we use to build microchips, very thin layers of materials with interesting properties, similar to what we were dealing with when we were designing, say, high-performance processor or memory chips. Mm-hmm. So I've had familiarity over the last 10 or 15 years in helping Sun design some of the advanced processors with some of these techniques, and there's an extension of that into then applying thin films, say, to energy.
Are you nostalgic about Sun?
No, 20 years is a long time. I'm glad to see Andy Bechtolsheim go back to the company. He was one of the founders of Sun, and went off to Cisco and did a couple startups, and he's come back, and he's got some great new products that Sun just acquired his company, and I think will really, I believe they'll have one or more hits from the products he's brought back, hopefully this fall, and it'll put them on a more positive course than they've been on for the last few years.
Andy has a touch.
He has an incredible touch, not only as an inventor, but as an investor. He was famously, the person who wrote the check to the Google guys.
The $100,000 check that they had to form the company in order to cash.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a story that $100,000 had a very high rate of return. One of the most fabulous investments of all time.
That's for sure. He's smart and lucky too, I think.
Well, what did they say? Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. When opportunities come along, Andy has learned to really recognize the great opportunities. So he's one of the best new venture investors in the history of the Valley, and this is a story that's not fully told. I mean, if you look for him, not much of the story of all the things he's invested in has been written. Yeah,
there's more to come.
I think he's done far more than people would generally recognize.
I believe that. Andy is unique.
Yeah, he really is. And he's a great hardware designer and an incredible asset. It doesn't matter what size of the company, and he just can tell very, very quickly if an opportunity has many of the characteristics we talked about earlier.
Yeah, sure. And the other thing is, of course, when you've had the success that he's had, $100,000 is a lot of money, but if he lost it, it wouldn't hurt him.
Yeah, but he doesn't write a $100,000 check to everybody who knocks on his door. If he did, he'd be broke because everyone in the world would be lined up. So it's, there's some filter who gets to talk to him, but in general, he's shown himself to be very perceptive about which things have the big potential. In the same way that we do at Kleiner Perkins, we're looking for big ideas, but also people who are very practical. And I think he saw in Larry and Sergey and their ideas about search and the web, not only a big vision of indexing all the world's information, but a very practical, from the computer science department at Stanford kind of algorithm that would get them started. And so he saw both the passion and the practicality that are, two essential ingredients.
Are the people who are starting these companies any different than they were when you were starting Sun?
They're younger relative to me. Yeah.
Well, that's sad but true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are they the same background, same approach, or is there something different about it?
Well, they grew up there are more of them. They grew up in the age of personal computing. They know less about what, say on the IT side now, they know less about what happened before 1975, say in the early days of computing, mini-computer or mainframe era. On the other hand, the energy presentations we see, I saw an energy presentation in the last few weeks where somebody's saying, well, here's the timeline for this technology. The first prototype was in 1896, And then there's some more work in 1950, and then in 1975, and 1993. And the reason is that a lot of these things are ideas with roots in chemistry, physics, or mathematics, where the material science didn't exist. And that's really what has changed, is our ability to engineer some of the materials that we needed to make these old ideas practical. So we expect to see longer historical stories like that.
How do you lead a team?
Lead a team?
How do you lead a team?
I
mean, how do you put one together? And then how do you effectively take it to the destination that you want it to be? I think some people are good at it and some people aren't good at it.
Well, the team has to have the passion. I mean, sometimes it's possible to incubate a project and go and find people. Say if I have a passion, I can go find some people who share my passion and seed them with that passion, and they'll find a slight variant of what I want, or a substantial variant of what I want to do, and they'll take it and run with it. I'll get some version of it to go. This was the case with the Java project. I mean, I didn't have the original vision, but I was in there with them the whole time, and they ended up somewhere. And I managed to help them find a successful place to go, but it wasn't exactly the way I would have used the technology. So the same thing is true when people come in with new ideas. They have some passion. You can direct it a little bit, but you can't change it all that much. So it's generally incomplete. They don't know how to market it. They don't know what their first customer should be. They have their big vision, but the big vision is a big circle. And somewhere within that circle is something that is very much more practical. And you try to steer them to something within their big circle, because if you try to take them too far out of the circle, it's just not gonna work. So you can't lead. You can only steer, guide, nudge, I think.
Sort of herd.
Well, yeah. I mean, you need to create. You don't want a group that's a bunch of cats. I mean, they're not a herd animal, right? And you don't want a group that's a bunch of buffalo. Those are not farm animals, right? You need something that will stay inside the fences and work together. More of a herd kind of thing.
Is there an ideal size of a group?
Yeah, in the formative stage, it should be the number of people who can have lunch. And above about 6, it's hard to have one conversation. Maybe 8 is the maximum. It has to be at a rectangular table, not a round one, because you don't end up with one conversation at an 8 round. So it has to be a rectangular 8 table. That's the limit. 6 is better. So the ideal is to find a group of six or less people who have enough to have the big vision, somebody to make sure everything's working, and to put a prototype of something together. Beyond that, you start to really need management. And it's very much harder to change direction, because you can't change direction by just having a conversation over sitting at a modest-sized table where everyone can have some airtime.
Yeah. So the difference between the 6 can come to a consensus that they've made a mistake or they've made progress.
Right.
Whereas when you get more than 8 or 10 or 20, someone has to have an edict.
Well, it's also the case that somebody's probably not there that day, or somebody has to be somewhere else, and now it starts to slow down. And the ability to make the corrections, to do the nudges, to achieve a gradual turn as a sequence of nudges is much more limited. And if you get too small, so you get down to 4 or 3, you start to get to the point where there isn't a broad enough perspective from the group to be able to get past the problems. You can stay with 1 or 2 or 3 people for a while, but you need more people just to get the work done. Just not enough hours in the day. There's enough facets to most of these things. You need a collection of people with different skill sets.
Do you find that as you get older and are having different roles in these different kinds of groups, that you're gaining or losing patience?
I'm patient as long as people listen. In other words, if I go to a meeting with someone and I tell them what I think, and I believe they're listening, even if they don't act on it, then my patience will be, pretty long-standing. But when you get to the point where people aren't listening, and then it's either not worth your time, or you need to lose your patience or make a change, or just decide that you're not the right person to help them.
Yeah, I can understand that. So now you're a venture capitalist. You still consider yourself a technologist?
Yes.
And are you pursuing any personal interests in that area? Are you hacking some code somewhere, or?
No. I'm designing a sailboat.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your sailboat.
Well, it's an attempt to do integrative systems design. The idea is that a modest number of people living on a sailboat, a larger sailboat, is something, say, more than 100 feet long.
Okay.
It looks like a little island. You have a crew, 6, 10 crew, 5, 10 guests, 10 to 20 people. Mm-hmm. You're in a saltwater environment, and so you have to make fresh water, and then you have to heat it and keep the place cool and move yourself around and cook and clean and do sewage cleanup and pump the bilge and not put oil overboard and create power and not have too much emissions and try to be quiet and not too noisy, living right next to your power generation, sewage, and all the other treatment plants. So it's like an island. And so it's an opportunity to study energy efficiency, looking at all the kinds of technology that are available. So, for example, if you want to move it around, rather than just getting a bigger engine, try to figure out a way to make it movable with less power and quieter. And rather than putting in a big air conditioner, try to use better insulation. Because if you put in a bigger air conditioner, you've got to have a bigger generator to run it, and you need bigger fuel tanks to power it. And so you start to see the balance between insulation and so on. And so we started this project about a year ago and looked at all the advanced technologies for insulation, windows, heating, cooling, secondary heat recovery, fuel cells, biomimetic ideas in propulsion, aerodynamics, plastic teak decking instead of real teak to try to minimize maintenance, more energy efficient water making. So basically a survey on the consumption side, because this is really, it's not a factory for much of anything, but on the consumption side and the utility side, like a water treatment or water making plant, a sewage plant, a electrical plant, looking at all those sets of technologies and how they can be done in a more integrated and energy efficient way. So that's been a pretty big project, and we're almost complete with the design.
Now, 5 or 6 years ago, what immediately came to mind was Jim Clark built a big sailboat.
Right.
And he was founder of SGI and Netscape.
Right. This is being built at the same yard that Jim's boat was built.
Okay. And so, with perhaps your goals are slightly different, and certainly the time frame is different. You have the advantage of it's 10 years later or 5 years later, whatever it is. How is your boat different from his boat?
Well, he focused. A friend of mine built a boat and focused on making it feel really comfortable to gather people together. And I love his boat, and it's a beautiful place to go to get a group together and have a wonderful be with people, because they can't. You're in such a small space. Yeah. Jim came along and added a lot of automation, really worked on the electronics side of it. I hate fan noise and smells. I'm sensitive to bad smells and have always been interested in it.
Are you visiting your grandmother's house?
Well, yeah. No, those smells are familiar, but I have been interested and worked and talked over the years with Amory Lovins at the Rocky Mountain Institute with all these ideas of how we could do more with less. What they called factor 4, with a quarter the amount of resources input, we could have better amenities. So, for example,
so you're building a straw bale sailboat?
No, but for example, if you can have a smaller amount of electricity consumed, then you can maybe run the boat on batteries instead of on the generator at night. So it'll be quiet when you sleep. And so people think generally that if you use less, if you have to save energy, you have to give something up. But that's actually not true. In this case, every energy and resource efficiency we get brings an amenity. So it makes things better. And also this was a good segue into doing investment in this area at Kleiner Perkins, because we've been looking at all the most advanced technologies in all these areas for our project. So I have a full-time person researching technologies that might be applicable to the sailboat, and he feeds a lot of things in his investment opportunities. That's a lot of the people who say, "How did you find us?" It's because my research assistant found them for the sailboat project.
Oh, that's funny. That's really interesting. So as a venture capitalist, with this approach, you're not living 5 years in the future, but you're thinking 5 years in the future.
Well, it's actually, you have to think a long time in the future. It has a 25-year service life.
The boat?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it has a 5-year refit and a 10-year refit. And we're already trying to track when the technologies will be refittable. We've designed the platform to accommodate fuel cells. If we can do secondary heat recovery on fuel cells, we can, over a course of a year, we can save almost 40%. Given a certain electric load profile, we can save almost 40% of the fuel that we use in an operating year. But the fuel cells don't quite exist for the launch date in late 2008, because there's too much sulfur in the worldwide diesel supply. So we've become very aware of the nuances of where fuel cells are, where the fuel supply is, the energy content of different fuels, the opportunities for secondary heat recovery, and many bizarre technologies that people have proposed in all these areas that are not commercially viable. But we can make a roadmap going out 10 or 15 years of how we might apply these technologies in the future, and try to make the boat as a platform open to improvement in this way.
So how will your boat change the lives of future boaters? You know, what are you archetyping?
Well, the idea was that it would be more applicable to, the idea is more applicable probably to a third world community than to a yacht, because being an island, you know, a civilized island in an unfavorable environment is not that, with no fresh water around, it's not that dissimilar to being somewhere where you have to take water out of the ground that you have to purify, live off hopefully sunlight.
You
make yourself
have a floating village.
Well, you have to make yourself habitable in an inhospitable climate. In fact, you can't, if you move around, you can't even assume what the temperature and humidity profile is in general, because you could be in north latitudes, you could be equatorial. So you have to make the balance between, how do you create a habitat for the people on board using a minimal amount of resources. And that involves, you know, using advanced glass, advanced insulation, trying to understand creating that profile within a certain, with a minimal amount of energy.
I mean, you're building a boat with a 25-year service life. That implies that you're optimistic about the future.
Oh yeah.
Are you?
Well, there's promise in peril. I think we're more aware of the peril after 9/11. Before which, if there was danger, we'd say, well, people won't do X because they haven't done X, which is not a very good defense.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the area of bioterrorism, the standard defense was nobody's done it, so no one will probably do it. And that's not a good approach. But we have some challenges ahead, but we also have opportunity. Danger, opportunity, two halves of the same thing.
After post 9/11, in the venture community, suddenly there were people knocking on the door with security devices, you know, technologies for, you know, sniffing stuff out. Was there an increase in that kind of stuff?
Oh, I think anything that was claimed to be security or homeland security got you a much better chance of funding. People at a lot of the national labs could only get funding for their projects if they claimed to be working on that. But people will game that system too. Mm-hmm. But certainly there's been a lot more investment in this area. I mean, it's one thing to sniff something, though, and something else to cause the public health and civil defense or whatever apparatus to respond in a way that makes a difference to people. So the high tech can only go so far. It's a lot of this is investment in infrastructure that we've been cutting back on, as Laurie Garrett has pointed out in her book about the decline of global public health.
Let's say you made a real bonehead move and woke up tomorrow poor.
Mm-hmm.
How would you start again?
Well, I would be happy to have the job I have now. I could also, if I was doing a new company,
well,
I'd probably do a software company. If I couldn't be an investor, I'd probably do a software company because I'm still a pretty good programmer. I just haven't been doing it. So I'd write some software for either science or the web. I don't know which. And science, probably the life sciences, because that's, I think, where there's an enormous opportunity for new software to make a difference.
It's all software.
Well, it is. It's becoming less a wet science. It's still the case that the interactions are too complicated for us to do in a closed form in a computer, but a combination of robotic instrumentation and then software is the way the genome was sequenced. Cut it into a lot of pieces and have the computer put it together.
You know, you and I have talked a little bit in the past about the problem that I perceive that we have in this country of not enough people entering science and technology careers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not as popular as it once was, and maybe you know it's too long. Sputnik was too long ago. I don't know, for whatever reason.
Right.
Does that really matter? I mean, is it enough to have 12 really smart people, and you don't need the 100,000 pretty smart people to support them? Or
Silicon Valley would suggest otherwise. The real strength of the valley is in the crossplay between the people. The existence of the infrastructure to go out and get new problems solved, to sub out things, so you don't have to make your enterprises so large to do great things. So I think we are not on a good trajectory with education and training.
How do we fix that?
Well, I think we have to recognize. I've often said that smart people are uniformly distributed.
Not all smart people work at Sun?
Not all smart people work for you, and there are as many smart people in other countries as there are here on a per capita basis. Now, whether that's genetics, there's also the environment part, whether they get the training and education to meet their potential is another thing. But if China and India have 2 billion, 2.5 billion people, whatever the number is, and we have 500 million, they have 5 times as many people. If everybody's educated, there's going to be 5 times as many smart people there as here that are trained. So we can't expect that given the same environment that we will have as much creative productivity as 5 times as many people equally empowered. For the moment, at least, we have a different culture, a more entrepreneurial culture. We also have the strong legacy of Silicon Valley and all the companies in the information and biotech area that are here in this active web of creative relationships. There's no better place to do new entrepreneurial activity than here. Not even a close second. But that advantage will weaken over time if we don't continue to train the best and the brightest that we have, and to the extent that people who are the best and brightest from elsewhere choose to go home.
That's it. I mean, immigration is vitally important to this.
And it's not fun going through U.S. Customs. You're not treated. You feel kind of slightly abused. I mean, why are we taking our shoes off? It's a joke, right? I mean, one guy tries to bomb a plane with his shoes, so everybody has to take their shoes off for the next how long. There's lots of other places to stick things other than in your shoes. I don't quite know why the shoes have to. Why does my whole body have to go through the X-ray machine?
I guess that's a good point. Oh, okay, great. So we're not on a great trajectory.
I think from an educational standpoint, no. I think we need to train more people in science and engineering. I know Dean Kamen has got this organization trying to get people more excited about science in school. But we just don't take education as seriously. I don't think we don't pay our teachers well. We haven't been investing in public education. Tom Friedman had an article in the New York Times just a couple of days ago about how in Ireland, a number of years ago, they let everybody have free college education, and now they've got the highest per capita income in Europe. And obviously there's a lot of other investment profile changes as well, but that was certainly a key to changing the nature of the workforce. We're going in the opposite direction from that right now, in my judgment. I mean, the net effect anyways. We seem to have some political deadlock on how to improve our education, but we got to do something.
What would you do?
I think President Clinton proposed, and I would agree with, basically letting everyone have a college education who wants to go. I mean, obviously you have to have some tests. If you're goofing off, you lose the right. But if you want to go, you should get to go. So, and we should make that investment in our own future.
Hell yes.
Well, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But
well, we're running out of time, so let's talk while we can about, are there any other no-brainers?
Well, I think we have to stop spending money that we don't have. We're over-consuming. We have to find things to do other than just buying things. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty deadly. Learning things would probably be a better pastime, and that's a hard thing for a culture to change. But I certainly find learning things and solving problems the most challenging thing. And if we're going to compete in this, what Tom Friedman calls a flat world, mm-hmm. we're going to have to get more interested in solving problems and being entrepreneurial, and less in the kind of materialism that we've become and consumer emphasis that we have in this country.
You feel that we're sort of riding out 200 years of momentum? You know, in the sense that we did things in the 19th and 20th centuries that enabled us to be floating where we are now?
Well, the world was in tatters roughly after the Second World War. We didn't have any war on this continent, so
no
we had a big advantage. Also, John Doris pointed out 100 years ago, we changed our patent system and made our entrepreneurial invention environment more favorable than it was for Britain, who was the previous world power. So we've got to be careful. If we've got to lead, we are underinvested in education, so we're outgunned numerically. If we let the climate for entrepreneurship also worsen, such as, for example, taking away stock options for all practical purposes, this is a way of incenting people to work real hard to create new wealth and new jobs. We take that away, we'll lose some more momentum. And that's the clear and present danger.
How long is your sailboat?
50 meters, 58 meters. It's very big.
Yeah. So here you're a guy building this really huge boat.
Yes.
And talking about how we should reduce consumption and
mm-hmm.
live within our means. I'm sure it's within
right.
your means.
Right.
But so. You can say, oh yeah, but we're learning about new materials and I'm improving my energy efficiency and my.
Right.
It feels a little disingenuous to me.
Yeah, there's certainly.
On the other hand, you worked hard for 30 years, so fuck it, right?
Well, I hope that there's going to be some payback out of the boat project in understanding integration of energy technologies, and that's part of the payback. But you're right, it is an indulgence.
Feels good, doesn't it?
It's a lot of work to putting the project together. If I hadn't been a scientist or an engineer, I probably would have been an architect. And so, to the extent that the project is architecture, I like architectural projects.
We have just another minute. What are you excited about in the future?
I'm excited by the people who come through the office every day with great plans that will make positive change in the world, and to work with the entrepreneurs that are bringing this change, and hope that their stories inspire, more people to do the same. I find the story of, for example, a company that KPCB backed recently, Google, very inspiring. Larry and Sergey, I think, are great role models compared to some of the role models that we've had in the past for business success. They want to do good. They have a vision that's a good vision, great vision, a vision of good things. So being able to back entrepreneurs like that is very great pleasure.
And do you see yourself? You've talked about how you admire architects. Do you see yourself as an architect in shaping this?
Yeah, I really am an architect in the sense of software architecture or hardware architecture. I used to be more a builder as well, but as you get involved in more things, it's harder and harder to be the builder. Back when I was at Berkeley 25 or 30 years ago, I was...
you could build it all.
Well, I was doing Unix and doing most of the programming myself, and now there's Linux in the Linux community, but there weren't so many people or so many computers at the time, so it was it was great fun, but it was also kind of lonely. I think it's probably more fun to be in the kind of communities we have today.
God, people will hate me for not even mentioning open source.
Right.
Well, I mentioned it now.
Right. Yeah, well, we did open source back then a long time before even we knew what it was called. But the idea was that people ought to be able to build on each other's work. And that's the true in academia, where you publish your papers and people can learn about what you've done so they can do better. And that was the idea of the open source. So it's become more than that to some people and has a lot of flavors now, and it's a whole big movement. But the basic idea is that people can stand on the shoulders of each other instead of on each other's toes.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, it's a really good thing.
And not only that, but we got to the end of this without using the word deal.
John will be very happy.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
This program is made possible by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This is PBS.